So at the start of the Clone Wars, the Republic shocked the galaxy when they revealed their massive clone army, an army that was kept completely under wraps until the outbreak of the war with the Battle of Geonosis. And I figured today we could discuss a little bit about how the Republic actually hid an entire army and its equipment. I'm Colin, and this is Sci-Fi Deep Dive. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, to head down below and hit that subscribe button. So the clone army is massive, albeit not the largest military force in Star Wars history. It's smaller than the military mustered by the CIS, their competitor in the Clone Wars, and by the Galactic Empire, which succeeded it. But the Grand Army of the Republic, as it was formerly known, was still a massive fighting force, and not only was it the soldiers that fought on the ground and drove the vehicles, but it was the vehicles and equipment themselves. So how exactly does one hide the creation of an army, and particularly an army's worth of equipment and vehicles? Well, let's just jump right into it with the first element here, the clones themselves. It's pretty easy to see. Kamino was contracted to create the clones. Kamino itself was already a relatively remote world, and with a majority of the world's economic capabilities being directed towards the development of the secret army, there really wasn't a lot of outside dealings between Kamino and the rest of the galaxy leading up to the outbreak of the war. So it was pretty easy to keep the operations on Kamino under wraps, and Kamino was responsible for the design of a lot of these elements and a lot of these vehicles, and notably the design of the armor for the clone troopers. But when it came to developing things like, say, heavy weapons or small arms, they had to contract those out to other manufacturers. Let's start with the heavy weapons and the vehicles. Well, the Grand Army of the Republic had a massive fleet of vehicles, including things like the All-Terrain Tactical Enforcer, or ATTE, which would become their primary armored unit during the course of the war, and the massive starships that would transport Republic forces around, as well as famous gunships like the LAAT and its variants. So how exactly do you build an entire army worth of basically heavy tanks and scout vehicles and gunships and transports without the galaxy finding out? Well, the answer is a specific company, Rathana Heavy Engineering. Rathana Heavy Engineering was a subsidiary of Kuat Drive Yards, the famous shipbuilders that were centered on Kuat. Well, they had several subsidiaries around the galaxy, and one of the notable ones was Rathana Heavy Engineering. Rathana Heavy Engineering would have a long history, but their most notable projects would be tied to the development of the clone troopers' equipment prior to the outbreak of the war. It was Rathana Heavy Engineering that would manufacture things like the ATTE, and they would actually be not just the manufacturers, but the chief designers on the Acclamator-class assault ships, which is why there was a lot more Acclamators during the opening phases of the war. The Venators, by the way, the carrier battleship hybrids we see used by the Republic during the later days of the war, were actually built by Kuat Drive Yards proper around Kuat, which is a very public, sort of outward-facing ship manufacturer, so they really couldn't build secret ships over Kuat, which is likely why the Venators took so long to enter service. They weren't really seen until a few months into the war, but the Acclamators were present basically from day one because they could all be built in secret with Rathana Heavy Engineering, which, like I said, was handling a lot of the other vehicles. To handle the transportation back and forth of these equipment in between Rathana's manufacturing sites and Kamino, where the army was actually being prepared and mustered, a secret hyperspace lane was set up in between those two locations to allow the quick and easy transportation of men and equipment to and from these manufacturing sites, and to allow these manufacturing sites to quickly stock up the soldiers before their first engagement, the Battle of Geonosis. And the things that couldn't be built by Rathana Heavy Engineering were built on Kamino itself. Things like, for example, the Clone Troopers' armor, which were actually manufactured by Kaminoan Industries. Now, the only outlier in all the secrecy would be the blasters themselves, the weapons carried by the individual clone troopers. You see, the Grand Army of the Republic was armed with various variants of the DC-15. This was designed and manufactured by Blastech Industries, which is a massive blaster manufacturer. It is likely that they were the only customer receiving these DC-15s, so it's entirely possible that they were, say, telling their manufacturing line, hey, yeah, we have this whole new line of blasters coming out, just keep making these. But instead of shipping them off to various sellers, they're being shipped just to Kamino. But that's just an assumption. I don't know for sure that that's the case. All in all, though, all of this was designed to keep the clone army a secret, and it worked remarkably well, with the Republic itself not knowing about the clone army until moments before the Battle of Geonosis, the outbreak of the Clone Wars. And if you'd like to learn about the Battle of Geonosis and how the whole war started, I'll leave a link up here to my battle analysis video on that engagement. And I'd like you to let me know down in the comments how viable you think the idea of building an entire army in secret actually is. It obviously cost a lot of resources and credits to sort of keep everything hush-hush, and would it have just made more sense for them to manufacture the clone army out in the open, or do you think it was really worth the resource costs to sort of keep this whole thing under wraps? And if you have anything you'd like to see me cover from Star Wars, you can leave that down below in the comments. Last but not least, if you enjoyed this video, head down below, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos. So for Sci-Fi Deep Dive, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.